What we're going to work on in this video is learning how to graph horizontal parabolas. Now, before we start working on horizontal parabolas, let's remind ourselves on how to graph a vertical parabola. Now, if we look at any quadratic equation, so quadratic meaning that the degree is 2, or the highest exponent of the polynomial is 2, we'll name the coefficients in front of each of the variables as a, b, and c, just like we do when we use the quadratic formula. Now, a is equal to the number that's in front of the x squared. If nothing is there, we assume 1. b is equal to whatever's in front of the x, and c is equal to the constant at the end. Now, the first question you want to ask ourselves is, does this graph open up or down? Now, if it opens down, it means the parabola will generally have this shape. If it opens up, it'll have that shape. The way you can remember is that when it opens up, the parabola is happy, and if it opens down, the parabola is sad. Now, whenever you feel up, you feel positive. So if that first coefficient is positive, we open up. If it's negative, we open down. Now in this case, the A is positive, so we say it opens up, and our parabola will have this general smiley face kind of graph. Now, in order to find the y-intercept, we set x equal to 0, and then we solve for y. So when I plug in 0 into my problem, I get y is equal to 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 3, which gives me 3. In order to find the x-intercept, we do the opposite. So if we try to find, when we try to find the y-intercept, we set x equal to 0. When we try to find the x-intercept, we do the opposite and we set y equal to 0. So we end up getting y is equal to, x squared minus 4x plus 3. And we pop in 0 in there, we get 0 is equal to x squared minus 4x plus 3. We'll factor this using any technique you like. And then we'll end up getting x equal 3 and x equal to 1. Now, the last thing we want to look for is the vertex. Now, what the vertex is basically the bottom or the top of your vertex, depending on whether it opens up or down. You can think of it as the center line of our parabola. So the formula is h is equal to negative b divided by 2a. So the h is the x-coordinate of our vertex. Now the easiest way to remember this is that if we think of the quadratic formula, plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. See that right there? That is what your h is. So if we think of a parabola having a center line, and then we add a certain amount and subtract a certain amount, that gives us, right, this plus or minus negative b squared minus 4ac, that gives us the offset from the center line. So it's kind of easy to see that this right here, if we're looking for the middle of the parabola, it'd be just that part right there. So let's plug in our values. For b, we have negative 4. For a, we have 1. So this gives us 2. In order to find k, we then take this 2 and plug it back into the original equation. So we get 4 is minus 8 plus 3. So we get k is equal to negative 1. So the vertex will be 2, negative 1. Now let's graph this parabola. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put a dot on our y-intercept. So we go on our y-axis because it's our y-intercept, and we put a dot on 3. The next thing we want to do is go to the x-axis and put a dot on our x-intercepts. In this case, it'll be 3 and 1. And then we put a dot where our vertex is. So 2, -1. And that gives us a parabola. And we can double check it to see whether it opens up or not. And since it's happy, we know that it's opening up. Okay, so now that we've sort of reminded ourselves how to graph a vertical parabola, let's look at what makes something a horizontal parabola. Now, what makes a quadratic a horizontal parabola is that instead of x equal to a quadratic with the variable x, instead of y equal to a quadratic whose variable is x, in this case we have x equal to a quadratic, except the variable is now y. Basically what we did here is we switched my x's and y's. So this one will open horizontally. Now by opening horizontally, what I mean is it'll either open left or it'll open to the right. Okay, it'll open to the left when a is less than 0, and it'll open to the right when a is greater than 0. And again, we picked the a, b, and c just like we would if we were solving the quadratic formula. So in this case, a is what's in front of the y squared, the b is what's ever in front of the y, and the c is equal to the constant at the end. So since in this case a is positive, we're going to open to the right. Now, in order to find the y-intercept, whenever we try to find any y-intercept, whether it's a line, parabola, or just some general function, we always set x equal to 0 and then solve for y. So let's plug in 0 here. We'll then factor. And then we'll get y is equal to 3, y is equal to 1. In order to find an x-intercept of any function, we always do the exact same thing. We always set y equal to 0, and then we solve for x. So if we plug it into this formula over here, we get x equal to 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 3. So we get the x-intercept is 3. Okay. Now, if you were kind of savvy, you could sort of see that when we switch our x's and y's, our x and y intercept changes places on both ends. See, x-intercept here is now the y-intercept here. The y-intercept here is now the x-intercept there. Okay, now, so we can sort of see that when we change our x and y variables here, our x and y's down here change, and that's also true of our h and k. So we have a parabola that will open to the right. This is its parabola, and that coordinate system is still h and k. However, when we are working with something that opens to the right, it's now the k that's equal to negative b divided by 2a. So let's plug in our values. B is equal to negative 4. A is equal to 1. So we get, this time we get k is equal to 2. And then we plug 2 back into our original equation. And we get x is equal to 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 3. I'm sorry, not x, h. And that'll be equal to 4 minus 8 plus 3. And then h is equal to negative 1. So our vertex will be negative 1, right? H and K. So H comes first, and then K. So if we sort of recap, if we change the places of our x's and y's, the x-intercepts and the y-intercepts change places. And also the vertex, right? So here's my vertex before. These just switch places. The K becomes the H and the H becomes the K. Now, when we graph this parabola, we have 2 points on the y-axis this time. We have 1 point on the x-axis, and then we have 1 point here for the vertex. And we see that our parabola, it opens to the right. Now, go ahead and pause this video and try doing this problem. Okay, so now that you've tried it and you know where you're lost, let's walk through it together. So in this case, my A is equal to negative 1, my B is equal to 4, and my C is equal to 0. Since there's nothing there, we can think of it as plus 0. Now, in order to find the whether it opens left or right, in this case, the A is negative, so it opens to the left. So I can sort of do a sanity check on my graph. When I finish, it should look something like that. Now, in order to find the y-intercept, we set x equal to 0. So when we plug it in here, we get 0 is equal to minus y squared plus 4y. And then we, I'll probably pull out negative y as a GCF. Now, you can see that because we pulled out negative y as a GCF, the sign of what's left over should switch. So then we have minus y is equal to 0. Divide both sides by minus 1. I get y equal to 0 as one of my intercepts. And over here, I'll get y equal to 4 as my other intercept. Okay. Now, in order to find the x-intercept, what we'll do is we'll set the y equal to 0. Now, so we'll plug it in. And we'll get x is equal to 0. That's my x-intercept. And just know that whenever you have a y equal to 0 as one of your intercepts, that means that the origin is the intercept, so you'll always get x equal to 0 also. Now let's compute the vertex. K is equal to negative b divided by 2a, which is equal to, let's see, b is equal to 4, and then the a is equal to negative 1, and then again we'll get 2. And then when we plug this 2 back into here, just know that when you do this square, we're basically using PEMDAS rules. We always do our exponents before we do our subtractions. So you turn that into a 4 first. Right, so this exponent has precedence over that negative. And then we get minus 8. Oops, I'm sorry, this should be a plus. That's a plus. Plus 8. So then 8 should be equal to 4. So my vertex should be 4, 2. Okay, so now let's graph this puppy. My x-intercept, my y-intercept is 0 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's count the boxes. My x-intercept is also 0. And then my y-intercept should be 1, 2, 3. My vertex should be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, right there. in the middle of those two points. And then we should do a sanity check. And indeed, my parabola does open to the left.